For many years, in reflecting on the sorrows of Mary, I have frequently wondered what Simeon meant that day when he said to Mary, "Look, this child is marked for the fall and the rise of many in Israel, to be a symbol that will be rejected. Indeed, a sword will pierce you too, so that the thoughts of many minds will be held bare." And the swords that pierced her heart, they were many. There was the charge of adultery that tempted Joseph to want to dismiss her quietly. There was the fearful flight into Egypt to shield her child from a king bent on murder. There were the 3 days in Jerusalem when she lost Jesus, and when they found him, led her to cry out, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." There was the perilous day his own townspeople were filled with fury, took him to the top of a hill on which their town was built to throw him over it. There was the shocking day his own relatives tried to restrain him, for they were saying, "He's out of his mind." Then there were the dreadful final days when one of his closest friends, and surely Mary knew him, betrayed her son with a kiss. When the elders of his own people accused him of perverting their nation. When Herod mocked him and Pilate washed his hands of him. When his back was lashed with whips and his head crowned with thorns. When he was nailed to a cross between 2 thieves. When she stood beneath that cross and watched him breathe his last with an agonizing cry. Oh yes, Our Lady, she knew sorrow. And I suspect that only a small fraction of that sorrow has actually been recorded in the Gospels. But if you take them as a whole, all the sorrows in Mary's life, I think, stemmed from her effort to live as a mother with a child and as a disciple called to follow Jesus. Trying to balance a mother's protective love and a disciple's response, which was the response she gave to God at the very beginning. "Whatever you want, Lord. Do with me whatever you want." So, what might Our Lady's experience of sorrow say to each one of us? Well, if we call ourselves disciples, then we must experience sorrow both for others and for ourselves. First, we must experience sorrow for others. Now, the list of sorrows in our world are many. The injustices that plague people around us, keeping them from living lives more human and more Christian. Sorrows that spare no age, no gender, that afflict the haves and the have-nots. Sorrows that feed on poverty and prejudice, on abuse and abortion, on hunger and homelessness, on vice and violence, on greed and gluttony, on disease and death, and on the scores of infidelities to God, the score of infidelities to sisters and brothers, and the score of infidelities to the earth that sustains us. Unless the sorrows of others become our sorrows, then we don't reflect the mind of Jesus, who in the letter to the Hebrews we're told was able to sympathize with our weakness because he was tested as we are. If others hurt, we too hurt. Where people hurt, there we hurt. Basically, this is the compassion of Christ, the compassion he commanded when he told us to love others as he loved and loves us. If we do not suffer with, which is compassion, suffer with others, sorrow when they sorrow and where they sorrow, to that extent we are not reflections, images of the suffering servant. Secondly, not only are we called to experience the sorrow for others, but also for ourselves. And I'm not talking about wallowing in guilt or self-pity, simply that in our quest, in our responsibility of helping others, we also need to be aware of our own fragility, that we ourselves are in need of healing, that we have to pray ceaselessly, I believe, Lord, but at this moment, help my unbelief. We have to beg for forgiveness for the times when, like the priest in Luke's parable, we too have passed by the other side. As with Mary's sorrows, so with us. Discipleship costs, and it costs us dearly. And so we pray, Mary, Our Lady of Sorrows, aware of your Son's experience and your own, we come into God's presence. We come into your presence, conscious that God's justice will cost us. Help us then not only to hear God's justice, not only to be faithful ourselves to God, to God's people, and to God's earth, but perhaps mostly and most costly, help us to live it.